episode of the HeathcoteTech podcast. This is episode 3, and we're going to try something different this time. We're going to try a video podcast and see how this works across the different podcasting platforms. Again, I'm doing this as a way to communicate and reach out and connect with parents and families beyond just school and just email. At the same time, this is also a test bed or very much an experimental practice to see what works, what doesn't, and then how we can introduce this into the classroom in a meaningful way, potentially have students record podcasts, whether they be audio only, video only. So I'm using these episodes as an opportunity to test the various technologies and how we can then best incorporate them properly and effectively with students. So today's episode, I'm going to review the information and slides from the parent coffee that happened just this past Friday, the 28th of October, where we went over sort of how Heathcote integrates the technology program of the district. So run some slides, go over what we went over, and then hopefully this serves as a good refresher for anyone that was at the coffee that maybe wanted to hear something again, or anyone who might have missed the coffee. So enjoy the slides. Technology at Heathcote was the topic of the parent coffee on October 28th, and it was just sort of an overview of what we do here and how we integrate the district's technology plan. So first and foremost, just a little background on me, anyone who hasn't known me or met me before or talked to me about my background. This is my 20th year in Scarsdale, or I'm sorry, 20th year teaching, 9th year in Scarsdale. Film and television major. I worked in rock radio in Boston for a number of years. I worked for a high-tech publishing company in the 90s, did a lot of streaming media starting in like about 97, the very, very early days of it. So I come from a high-tech broadcast journalism background before I got into teaching. The two addresses at the bottom, the first one is the Heathcote Gateway, student resources, how to access different platforms. The other one's my blog, where I have updated information about headphone reviews, bits of information, resources for teachers, for students, for parents. This is what the Heathcote Gateway looks like. Everyone used this extensively during COVID. Across the top, you have things like teacher sites where you can access every teacher's homepage or every grade level's Google site through that. Grade by grade tech instructions underneath the tech instructions tab. So you can see how to log into different programs. Every program has a slightly different login process, and that's not an us thing. That's sort of dependent on the vendor and the platform and how they are able to connect with our databases and things of that nature. So that's why the gateway, the tech instructions have the individualized instructions for access. Resources are things like tutorials. The service status tab is something I added during COVID. Zoom, service status, Seesaw, Google, so you can actually check and see if any of them are experiencing outages, slowdowns, things of that nature. There's even down detector on that service status page. Down detector is great because it searches for across many different platforms. You could check and see if Verizon Fios is down or if Comcast is down, things like that. So it's always very helpful during COVID, during hybrid, to be able to check and see, because oftentimes the issues are not internally within Scarsdale or with our access. It's more with the vendor or the third party, the platform that we're using. This is the blog. So right now you can see there's some digital resources, digital citizen resources for parents. There's things on there, like I said, headphone recommendations, things like that. A lot of those tabs across the top are staff only. This is how the staff can check my calendar, reserve the lab, book me for lessons, things like that. So it's a very universal resource. Quick overview of the district technology. There's that link right in the middle of the page that goes to the district's technology overview. The biggest thing is the seamless integration. That's what we aim for. And we base everything we do off of national education standards, ISTE, International Society for Technology and Education. Those are sort of the core original standards. As states got more and more comfortable with creating their own standards, everything still was sort of based off of ISTE. ISTE is sort of the benchmark for technology education. But New York State does have their own now, and they're actually in the process of updating them and releasing new ones, because it is always an ongoing, technology changes every day. So these are the core components of New York State's K-12 fluency standards. We try to work all of these in to everything we do at Heathcote. again, the district is the policy. The district is the overview. The district is the plan, meaning that we don't do anything at Heathcote that is outside of the bounds of what district policy is, what district budgets are. We, as technology teachers in the different buildings, come together to help craft and create the district policy. So district wide, one-to-one iPads stay in the building this year. The last few years they've gone home because of COVID related reasons, virtual teaching, quarantine teaching, things of that nature. This year we're hoping that, we don't need to do any of that, so they'll stay in the building. However, we have prepped all the devices, have student names, we have chargers ready with all the student names, so if we did need to pivot, we are prepared. But they're staying in the building this year. Seesaw is sort of the core platform for K2. We do use many other things, many other platforms, Reveal Math, Wixie, Codable, Book Reader, but Seesaw is kind of the core platform we use in the lower grades. 3 through 5, one-to-one Chromebooks. We found that students benefited from being able to take them home and do homework on them. Pre-COVID, they would only use them in the building, and then any technology projects would sort of stop, or even if it's not a heavy technology project, even if they were typing an essay, like that would sort of stop when they went home, because if they didn't have access to a device at home, they just couldn't do it. So we're not sending the Chromebooks home every day, but teachers are able to make individual decisions based on need. So if everyone's working on a project that can be largely accomplished at home, take the Chromebooks home. There are days when the Chromebooks aren't going to be going home. The chargers will stay in the building all the time because the devices have 10 hours of battery life and they're only going home as needed. Sometimes one student may bring it home and another student in the same class may not, based on where those individual students are in a particular project. There may be more need for one to have it at home than another. So that's why we're allowing that flexibility to really have them be purposeful choices. Google is sort of the core platform, the login, Google Drive, we do a ton in Drive with docs, slides. But we also do things like WeVideo, Adobe Creative Cloud. Reveal Math is the district's math curriculum. This was made a couple of years ago by the Scarsdale Tech team, elementary tech team. These are sort of our periodic table. We kind of wanted to break it down to give a visual representation of the diversity of what we do. We're not just coding teachers or quote unquote technology teachers. It's much more broad than that. So a lot of what we do involves creating storytelling, using digital tools to create stories that are better or more engaging than they would have been if you just wrote a 5-paragraph essay. A lot of it is about digital citizenship and collaboration, and often those two things go together. So for instance, Google Drive is in both the digital citizenship and collaboration categories, because part of digital citizenship is being able to collaborate, knowing that you're not the only one on a document in a folder, knowing that you have to be respectful and aware of what you're doing because it impacts somebody else. So a lot of these apps are not single-use apps. They meet different needs and they further different purposes. Google Drive is also in the creating and storytelling one, because that's sort of where you curate your content and where you develop your narratives, your scripts. It may be where you store your video at the end, things of that nature. So what does all this look like at Heathcote? How do we really approach these things, all these different apps, all these different platforms? Biggest thing is purpose. And that's something I push very heavily, is that we're not just firing up a computer to use a computer just for the sake of using a computer. Everything we do, everything we create, there should be purpose behind it. We should know why we're doing it, why we're choosing the apps that we're choosing, why we're doing the process that we're doing. I want the students to really understand that it's not just, here's a device, turn it on, things happen, because that's not true. With anything we do as adults in work life, there's purpose behind it. We know that we're picking up the iPhone because we want to make a phone call. We know that we're picking up the iPad because even if it's, we want to look at the news, whatever it may be, there's that purpose and that intent behind using the technology. And that's very much a part of my integration of technology in the curriculum. Google's kind of ahead in general, because everyone gets, even kindergartners get accounts. Now they are at scarsdaleschools.org email addresses technically. However, there's no inbox for them, but that allows us then to do Google single sign-on for Seesaw. that allows us to do Google single sign-on for other things. It just is an easy way to sort of integrate. So the left side of this is the upper grades. Drive is sort of the key. Then we use like WeVideo, Campus Press, which is the blogging platform. So every third grader gets their own blog. That's a WordPress based blog. So they learn about writing and publishing. They learn about audience, but they're also using a universal platform, WordPress. So they're really engaging with real technology and not just sort of elementary students. We're going to, downgrade this for you, but they're using the real tech. Canva and iMovie are at the bottom of those things because we're starting to experiment with those. Canva did a big push to get public schools up and running on their platform. It's a great design platform to design infographics, posters, things like that. So we're testing it out now to see how it goes, to see how easy it is for teachers to manage, things like that. Same thing with iMovie in the lower grades. We've done a little bit in first grade with it, sort of testing out ways to use it. I hope to use both of those more universally this year. And part of this is iterative, which is like Canva and iMovie for me, and how I integrate it is we want to keep improving on what we do, and that anything we do now, we're doing not just for this moment, but we're doing to hopefully make the next moment better as well. So even if we don't have great success or finish this year or this unit or this lesson, hopefully that'll make the next one better. One of the big things about this that really came to life was last year, spring of 22, a tree fell on the fourth grade wing, and it made the fourth grade wing not usable. So we were in the middle of a big project with the fourth grade, big video project using green screens and things like that. And we had to sort of pivot and struggle to get it finished. And then on top of the tree falling on us, myself and two of the three fourth grade teachers had COVID, and we were quarantined and isolated, and tried to sort of stress to the students that that's part of that iterative process is that even if that project isn't great or doesn't come out how we envisioned it, the next project they do in fifth grade hopefully will be that much better based on what they learned. So none of these things are done by themselves, which leads to this. And I love this sort of expression, and I have it on my wall in the lab, is things are going to go wrong. Like a tree's going to fall on the building, and then we're going to have to move classrooms or whatever it may be. It's okay. Like, we work in these very finite timelines where, school ends and the grade is over, and then 2 months later you start a new grade. So sometimes we just have to embrace the failure and just know that it's going to be a mess and things are going to go haywire, and just embrace it and know that it's all right. Like, we're going to learn from it and it's going to help us improve. But we have to be okay with a little bit of the madness, because it's going to help us get better down the line, and then we'll have that experience to fall back on and learn from. And it also allows for taking risks, because we know, like, we can take a big leap, and if it doesn't work, we're okay with that, because we embrace the dumpster fire, and we know that if we fail on that big leap, we at least have learned something as a way to do it different, better, tweak it, change it, whatever it may be. If everything's sanitized and perfect all the time, there's no real push to do something different. There's no real, it's not bold, it's generic and it's bland, and it's just kind of going through the motions. If we have a mentality of iteration, if we have a mentality of embrace the dumpster fire, it allows us to try new things. It allows us to be okay if they don't work out. It allows us to look back on that and go, you know what, this year we're going to do X because last year we did Y, and Y kind of was a failure, but that's okay because we're going to do X that much better. And that's sort of what embrace the dumpster fire is. And every project is a story. What I do is I always work with the teachers, and it's a very collaborative process. So the technology is intertwined with the curriculum. So whether the project is truly a story, as in a personal narrative, or if it's just they're doing a story of their learning. So if they're doing a documentary on animal senses, even though that's not sort of a personal story, it's still a narrative, and they're still telling the story of their learning. They're telling about the research of how animals communicate, the research that they did on how animals, find food, how animals build their habitat, whatever it may be. Every project, essentially, the students are creating a story of their learning, whether it's in the third person, the first person. They're still having this final thing that represents what they've done. So that's what we try to get through. And again, we do everything collaboratively, or I do everything collaboratively with the teachers. So that way the technology is infused within the actual day-to-day core content area curriculum. So what types of projects? Everything from very simple things like kindergarten writing, where with one kindergarten class, the day before I did this event live for parents, we did 4 different pages in Seesaw. And the first page was just writing the letter F, lowercase and uppercase, a few times. Second page was doing it, but with sort of a paper-based background. So the students had lines that they can kind of keep within. Third one was writing a couple of words with that letter. So then each one of those pages got better. Their handwriting got better, their interaction with the device got better, they got more comfortable using the eraser. So that's a sort of a one-off project, but it's kindergarten, so they're going to be much more sort of small projects, just because it's kindergarten. We're not doing super long-term in-depth ones. Jump to 5th grade, and they're making a documentary movie for their social studies unit around immigration, where they actually have to find somebody who's an immigrant, interview them about their experience, why they left their country, why they came here, what are the differences, what do they miss, things like that. And then they have to write a narrative based on that. They have to turn that into a script. Then they turn that into a 3-minute movie with images, with dialogue, voiceover, text. So that is a much more in-depth project. And we scale this up and we scaffold this up. So everything I do in kindergarten, I do looking towards what they're going to need to know in 1st grade. In 1st grade, what can we do there to build on what we did in kindergarten, and how are we going to prepare them for 2nd grade? And sometimes things are going to be similar, like the cultural universals in 2nd grade is more an intro to Google Slides, basic, putting on a picture, putting on some text, aligning them, making them look good, understanding size and placement and stuff. By 3rd grade, that cultural universal project turns more into a graphic novel, where they're using research to create a story, but then that story becomes a cartoon character that they make, who becomes a tour guide of a place. So they're still using Google Slides, but now it's less about a slideshow and it's more about just a single image background where their character is on it and a speech bubble pops up talking about the location, talking about the image. So sort of a Knuffle Bunny style of graphic novel, where the backgrounds are real images and then the characters on top are sort of like the students create their own cartoon character essentially. So we build all these things, build on one another. 4th and 5th grade starts doing Ignite and TED Talk style presentations. Ignites are slideshows. The real Ignite platform is 5 minutes, 20 slides. Slides auto advance every 15 seconds. The whole point of an Ignite is, their tagline is enlighten us, but make it quick. The idea of being concise and succinct. And we do that with students, but 4th grade, it's more like a minute and 45 seconds, 7 slides, still that 15-second auto timing, but it gets them used to pacing and building a slide and building a script where they have to really know the content and they can't rely on the text on the screen. And in fact, when we do these, we stress 1 image or 6 words. Like, we don't want the audience reading off the slides or the student reading off the slides. We want the students to tell us the story, to tell us what they've learned, and have a single simple image behind them. And they memorize and they practice, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody knows it's going to be perfect. The reason why we have them script and practice and rehearse is so that really they own the content and they really own the story. And it's a minute and 45 seconds. So it's also about just them understanding what it feels like to get up in front of an audience, understanding what it feels like to give a presentation in that format. And if a 4th grader can do an Ignite in a minute and 45 seconds about hurricanes, every other time they stand up in front of an audience to give a talk or give a presentation is going to be that much easier, because it's maybe not going to be timed. We have opportunities for students to give TED style talks where there's just a couple of slides and they advance them when they want. And then they're able to make those distinctions, those determinations between, by the time they get to capstone, do I like talking in front of people? Do I like the pacing of the Ignite talk? Do I prefer a TED style talk? Do I want to make a movie? They have all these experiences that they can pull from to decide which is the medium they want to use to convey their learning at the end of 5th grade. Just to give you a sense of sort of a life cycle of a project, lower grades, a lot of it starts with paper, and it may be draw a character on paper, take a picture of it, put it into Book Creator, and then add a speech bubble on that character, and then you share it via Seesaw. And it can be that simple in the K2 realm, We also do things similar, like with cultural universals. They may write down their notes, then they may jump to Google Slides, and then they share it in Seesaw, or maybe they just share it in Google Slides. But there's always a process that we go through from the beginning part of whatever the unit is, whatever the lesson is, to the end, to the final sort of publishing of it. And again, I do everything with the classroom teachers. So these things are done together. So the classroom teacher may say, look, we're going to start to research. So I'll help them a little bit with the research. Then they go do the research on their own. Then I'll help them with, here's how to take good pictures. Then they'll spend some time away from the lab taking good pictures. Then they come back, talk about how to edit those pictures, put them into iMovie or put them into Book Creator. Then they go back to the classroom. They spend some time doing that. Then when they come back, we talk about publishing. So it's very much an ingrained technology component of the curriculum. They're not stopping learning in social studies to then come to the lab to do something techie. They're not stopping science to then come to me. And then they're not stopping the tech when they leave me to go back to quote unquote regular work. It's all intermixed, blended together. Similar with third grade, obviously, 3 through 5, obviously, it's a little bit more intense. Projects just get bigger, more long form. So they may write a script or a narrative in, a doc. Then they turn that script into a wee video where they make the documentary, where they're using the pacing and the outline that they did in the Google Doc. Then they're going to publish it or upload it to Google Drive so everyone can look at it, give feedback. And then when that's done, I can put it on YouTube for them. So then they can share it beyond just Google Drive. And then they can take that YouTube video and put it into their blog. So then they can write a blog post as a reflection on the project and say, I made this video. It started out as an idea, and then I had to write a narrative. I had to write a script, and they can have all those things in a blog post where they can really publish their very literal story of their learning and then have the actual final product on their blog, which then I think is going to be great as they go on because those blogs can stay with them through high school. So then by the end, by senior year, they can look back and say, oh my gosh, here's all the stuff I've done and created and published. And here's how I've grown as a student, as a person, as a learner all these years, because I, at 18, can look back to what I was doing when I was 8. And I think that's a very powerful option for them to be able to have that historical reference of things that they have created and published, which leads to choices, and I want them to make good choices, knowing that these things all have the potential to go online. I always say act as if everything you do can be seen by everyone in the world. So when you're doing these things, because they're digital, there's always that potential that anyone in the world can see it. So make smart choices. Yes, you could put anything you want on it, but should you? What does this project need? Not what you want to put in it, but what does your audience need? What is the person who's going to see it, who has no context for you or your story? How are they going to take it? How are they going to interpret it? What kind of judgments are they going to make about you as a creator? So I want them to make these purposeful choices. And content is key. No rainbows, unicorns, and fireworks, basically meaning keep it good. Like keep the content key, because you could spend 10 minutes focusing on the different fonts, the different color, and then your page is still blank. Where if you write for 10 minutes, okay, it's Arial 11, but at least you still have 10 minutes worth of writing. So no rainbows, unicorns, or fireworks is a big thing. And I stress that, and the kids, it's sort of a running joke because they start to understand by 5th grade. It's like, get it done, get the work done. It's very easy to fancy it up or do whatever. But then they start to realize that they don't need the rainbows, unicorns, and fireworks because their content is really good. So content is key. And then the audience. Like I said, purposeful decisions. I want them thinking about who's the audience, who's going to see this, what are those people going to think about it, how are they going to think about the creator. I want them to be, again, purposeful and thoughtful about their choices. I want them to be thinking long term, not just I'm going to show up, press a couple of buttons, do a thing, and then move on to the next project. But like, what's going to happen with this? What's this thing I'm making? Where's it going to go? Who's going to see it? I want them thinking about that full life cycle of their work. And their audience can just be their peers in the classroom, parents, YouTube. I mean, it just depends. And I want them thinking about that and thinking about how the different projects, the different publishing mediums, the methods, like, can have different audiences, and you can create for different audiences. You can create with different purpose in mind. But I want them thinking about that, where they can make those smart choices about I'm going to make this for nobody, or I'm going to make this and I want to share it with everybody. And then they're going to hopefully make different, more informed decisions about what they create and how they create based on that. We put as much as we can on YouTube. Because a lot of what we do is videos, talks, things like that, because I want them to be able to have a historical record for themselves. I want them to be able to be proud of the work that they've done. I want them to be able to put these in their blogs and reflect on them. It's a HeathcoteTech channel, which is a totally separate account. So it's not actually tied to me. So it's sort of multiple layers of the identity protection. We're not uploading student, like the student names. File names aren't like on there. Like it's not their email addresses that get shown. First names only. If a student doesn't want their stuff on YouTube, we definitely don't. I mean, we're very respectful of that. But it gives them the opportunity to think about, am I willing to have this up there? Do I want to? And oftentimes with the work that the students put in, they're excited about this opportunity because they are proud of the work that they've created, and they're proud of the choices that they've made, and they're proud of the content they've created. So they want to be able to send the link to, aunts and uncles and grandparents in other cities or states or countries and be proud of the work that they've done. And this creates that real sense of ownership and that real sense of, I'm a creator and I'm creating good content. The blogs, again, 3 through 5, that's another audience. Third grade, only Scarsdale schools can see it. But by 5th grade, we can open it up if we want to. So again, act as if the world's going to see it, because one day something you make may be seen by the world, and it helps them to really understand and have a concrete baseline for what that means to really publish and to really have an audience, because they know that they have this website, this blog that may eventually be seen by somebody. And it changes sort of their thinking and how they approach things when it's real. And of course, we always talk about how many things are on the internet. And there's only two things, good and garbage. Look for the good, ignore the garbage. And we talk about that with the students all the time. Like when you're doing a search, keep that in mind. There's only two things. So anything you see is going to fit in one of those two categories. So make purposeful choices. Example I always use is if you're looking for an apple, you're going to get a picture of the fruit and you're going to get a picture of the Apple Computer Company logo. One of those is good, one of those is garbage, because one suits your needs and one doesn't. One is if you're doing a technology project and that fruit picture is garbage. It's not that it's inappropriate, but it's like you don't need it. It's not serving your needs. It's not serving your purpose. So I want them thinking about that, and thinking about that in terms of how do they create the good. And of course, this is a little overly simplistic, but it's also elementary school. So I try to make it sort of as simple as possible so that they can at least start to understand that, there's not a billion things on the internet. There's not a million things on the internet. There's really two. There's things that are useful to you. There's things that are beneficial, and there's things that aren't. And the goal is to always seek out the good stuff, create the good stuff, and then be able to understand and distinguish between the two. So that's why that's sort of one of the, alongside with the no rainbows, unicorns, and fireworks, the two things on the internet is one of my other big sort of mantras. And at the end of the day, it's all about what's your story. I want the students to be comfortable understanding that they can tell the story of their learning. They can create their own narratives. They can do whatever it may be, but they have the skills and ability then to create with purpose, to create a well-formed story, a well-formed project that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that they understand that the world may see it, or just a classroom teacher may see it. And I want them to really understand and have concrete examples of this for themselves, which is why we use blogs and movie making and design and infographics and stuff, because I want them to be able to see that there is not just one way to use technology. There's not just one way to tell a story, and that they have the ability to tell these stories, and we want to hear them, and we want them to share what they've done, what they've created, what they've learned. So reach out anytime. Hope that covers pretty much most of it. Just thinking back on questions that came up during the actual live presentation, I know one thing that comes up a lot is like coding and stuff, and we do a lot of coding and robotics. And what we'll do is we'll put that into spaces that are separate from the big curriculum projects. So we usually always have the students up and running on Tinker by the end of September and kick off lessons with those. And then when we have little breaks in between projects, what we'll do is we'll come back with sort of workshop where the students are at, so I can track all the progress. Different grades will use little robots and things like that, so they have an experience, not just sort of block coding on a device, but like physical coding with the B bots and the blue bots and things of that nature. And then coding becomes, by fifth grade, sort of very personal, where some students are very into it, some students aren't so much. And we keep bringing them back in to touch base and catch people up and answer questions. We also understand that at some points, students are going to have very different interests. And that's sort of what going back to that storytelling, is like, we want them to be able to, by fifth grade, choose the method or medium that they are comfortable with, that they enjoy working with. And that's why we give them different options and different things to experience. And, Codable, CodeSpark in the lower grades, Tinker, started in second grade, but 3 through 5. And it's all block coding, but it also has the ability to switch the code to Swift and Java and things like that. So it definitely scales much higher. And they definitely have experiences with that. But I want to make sure that they understand that computers are not just about robots and coding. Computers are about creating, curating, telling stories, and that there's many ways to do that. So that's sort of the big thing. As always, follow up anytime. There's my email. The Heathcote Gateway has resources. The blog has resources. And I hope you enjoyed another episode of the Heathcote Tech podcast. We'll see how this goes, and we'll try to get students up and running and telling their stories via this platform at some point soon. Thank you.